Record on this.
Oh.
Try that again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Coffee Dialogue. It's our monthly educational presentation for Fringe Coffee. Today, we're very lucky to have Andrea Kawabata from the University of Hawaii. She specializes in coffee and orchard crops, and I've asked her to come and speak to us today about pests and diseases. Coffee pests and diseases generalized for most coffee producing countries. So there's a lot to learn from Hawaii. We don't have a presenter today particularly focusing on pests and diseases in California. We're still a very new coffee producing origin. We're only about 20 years old. Hawaii's 20 years old, so we have a lot to learn from them, and it's a great chance to gather some helpful knowledge. Andrea works with the University of Hawaii, and she's an agricultural extension agent. We are recording, and we will hold off questions till the end. If you have a question that comes up, please write it in the box, and we'll bring it up after the presentation. So I'll turn it over to you now, Andrea.
Great, thanks, Ben. And thanks to you and Fringe and the folks who have organized these coffee dialogues. Appreciate the invitation to present today. And welcome everybody who's joined us. I will be talking about Hawaii's coffee pests and diseases. I'm not really certain which ones in particular you guys also have there in California. So this is going to be quite a general presentation on what our growers are facing today and how they are managing these pests and disease issues. So again, my name is Andrea Kawabata. I'm an extension agent with the University of Hawaii Cooperative Extension Service. And I'm located on the Big Island of Hawaii in the Kona district. And I work with the commercial coffee and orchard crops. So let me start sharing my screen and get this presentation started. Okay. All right, so we're here to learn from each other. My coworker Stuart and I, we have visited California in the past, and we really enjoy working with the growers there as well as in Hawaii. And so I'm really honored to be sharing some of the information that we have here in the islands with you all. So this presentation will cover just a brief overview of Hawaii's coffee production. I'll go over some of the major as well as a little less major and minor diseases and pests that we experience here in Hawaii, as well as how the growers are managing them. As I go through the different pests and diseases, I'll talk about some of the current projects that we have going on, particularly through CTAR and in collaboration with USDA researchers, and then how the industry as well as stakeholders have responded to the introduction of some of these new pests. And throughout the presentation, I'll have links at the bottom typically of the page, and hopefully that'll share some resources that you can check out in the future after this presentation for additional details on the different pests and diseases. So I'm hoping to also share this PowerPoint as a PDF, so the links will be clickable as well. Right, so just a little background of Hawaii coffee. Coffee is grown throughout the state on basically every major island that we have: Kauai, Oahu, Molokai. We have a little bit on Lanai, Maui, and Hawaii. We have a little more than 1,400 farms, and coffee is grown on about 7,000 acres throughout the state. Our coffee is valued at the farm gate at about $48 million, and that's for cherry sales. And then if you're, processing that coffee, our green is valued at about 84 million. So we've got a really nice industry, and it's, depending on the year, second or third in the top commodities that we have here in Hawaii. So the largest farm is on Kauai. We also have other mechanical farms on Oahu, Molokai, and Maui. And most of our smaller farms are based on the Big Island as well as on Maui. The varieties that are grown most commonly are going to be Typica or Kona Typica, as well as Katura. And on the mechanically harvested farms, they do have Katuai as well. So I'll jump right into some of the pests and diseases that we have here in Hawaii. You know, in the past, prior to 2010 or so, coffee farming was much easier. We didn't have the major pests and diseases that we have today. Basically, their major pests would be some outbreaks of grain scale, as well as coffee root knot nematode, which you may know that once you've got that in your soil, you really can't get rid of nematodes, especially in perennial crops. So we do have had those couple of pests and diseases throughout the years, but we've had some major ones come in since 2010. So the most recent, of course, is the most devastating coffee disease in the world, coffee leaf rust. It is found throughout all the major coffee growing regions throughout the world, and coffee is still surviving. So the other countries have learned how to manage with coffee leaf rust. If you've never seen this disease before, it creates these yellow to yellow-orange spots on the leaves. If you were to turn over that leaf, you'll see this yellow to orange yellow powdery spores within the lesions that are created. It kind of looks like Cheeto dust. That's what it's been described to me in other terms. And you know, as these spots spread, they will take over the leaf. It'll hurt photosynthesis, right? And you know, without good management, these lesions can spread to the point of defoliation. And when the trees no longer have leaves, like you see in the feral coffee on the right-hand photo, it really hurts the development of coffee berries. The berries need the nutrients and the energy coming from the leaves. And so you get, you know, a lot of dying berries, you get a lot of floaters. You may also get branch as well as tree dieback. So this disease is really detrimental to the coffee industry, especially if you don't have resistant varieties, which a lot of the foreign countries do have these days. And so they use that as a long-term management strategy. Coffee leaf rust started, it was first found on Maui in October of 2020, so just last year. And shortly thereafter, we found it in Kona on the west side of the Big Island. And then it has spread throughout the state, unfortunately. At this point in time, not all the farms have coffee leaf rust, so we are still in a preventative measure type of technique to prevent its spread, as well as management for the farms that do have coffee leaf rust. So you know, luckily in 2015, myself, Stuart, industry, as well as researchers from Hawaii managed to travel over to Brazil and learn about coffee berry borer, as well as coffee leaf rust. And so with this information, we prepared some outreach materials for growers just to be aware of this disease. You know, we did not have it prior, so we wanted them to be aware of it so they could look out for it and know what to look for. And so since having coffee leaf rust, we've prepared additional coffee materials such as this trifold brochure. We've created publications on spraying, monitoring, as well as pruning and field sanitation. And so that hawaiicoffeeed.com website is where we're hosting a lot of these publications, photos, and other coffee information. And we've transferred this down to the growers who really need the information through workshops, field days, webinars since the pandemic, farm visits, phone calls, emails, you know, every which way possible, even radio advertisements for rust, as well as for our workshops and other events. So just getting that information out there spreading it as wide as we can, and getting people aware of this disease, aware of how to stop its spread, how to identify it and distinguish it from other diseases that look similar, and then also how to manage coffee leaf rust. So prevention, of course, is key, but also knowing what to look for and early detection is also critical for the management of coffee leaf rust. And so early on, we found a stand of feral coffee that did have coffee leaf rust. At that time, we weren't going on farms yet, but we decided to, keep track of this stand of coffee. And these photos show the same leaf over time from December 9 and 7 weeks later. And on December 9, we could barely make out a couple of spots there on the leaves, and these were the start of coffee leaf rust. And over the course of 7 weeks, you see how quickly coffee leaf rust can inundate a leaf. You see, more spots showing up. You can see the spores showing up on the underside of the leaf within those lesions. The lesions start to enlarge, start to coalesce, and start to kind of come together as larger spots and lesions. And then even at that 6-7 week mark, you start seeing necrosis or browning of the leaves and leaf tissues dying. So things happen really quickly. And so, knowing what to look for, monitoring for coffee leaf rust, and then catching it early is, really important in being able to manage it at an economical level. So for you guys, as well as for our growers, we're really pushing scouting for coffee leaf rust, especially where the farms do not have coffee leaf rust at the moment, or they do not think they have coffee leaf rust. This disease is airborne and can be transported physically as well. So we never really quite know where the spore is going to land. So we recommend growers to check all trees. We see it in areas popping up in, the bottom third of the tree canopy where it's a little more humid. Sometimes it can be a little more dense in foliage. A little more moisture is being captured in those areas, and that's what coffee leaf rust really likes to germinate with. We see it under shaded areas of the farm where overstory trees create a little more shade in those areas, along roadsides where vehicles will pass through or stop, and also where pigs, other animals, workers, visitors are stopping, parking their vehicles, walking through the farm frequently. And so, it's sometimes not very easy to find it early on when the lesions are barely visible, like this first photo on the left is showing. So we provide contact information either through the Cooperative Extension Service or through our Department of Agriculture for growers to take clear photos and then submit it for identification. So even coffee seedlings, like the top photo on the right-hand side, can become infected by coffee leaf rust. And so, we've heard from researchers and other presenters in the past that coffee leaf rust doesn't like young leaves. But, at higher populations and higher severity, we do see coffee leaf rust showing up on very young leaves as well as on very young plants. So take a look at all the plants, keep an eye out for this, and scout to be able to find leaf rust early. So at the moment, we're working off of recommendations for management strategies based on foreign countries and what they're doing, and we're trying to update that with protocols that are more specific to Hawaii conditions, as well as Hawaii products that are available for use. And so just to kind of summarize what the growers are doing to control coffee leaf rust, first off is going to be prevention with sanitation and disinfestation and disinfection with 70% alcohol or a 10% Clorox solution, as well as washing off of vehicles, as well as any kind of attire that's worn through the field. Monitoring for early detection. Detection at a level of under 5% is critical for our contact fungicides to be more effective in helping to manage coffee leaf rust. Of course, we can only spray with certain fungicides that are approved for use on coffee as well as approved for use in Hawaii. So knowing what those fungicides are, their proper rates, as well as getting good coverage, specifically under that leaf to kill the spores of coffee leaf rust is really critical. Pruning and desuckering of the tree helps to open up the canopy, get better airflow through there, to dry up any excess moisture, and then to also help make the spraying more effective and other cultural practices to be easier. Maintaining weed control can help to reduce some of that moisture and shading around the base of trees and prevent spores from being splashed back up from weeds back up to the undersides of coffee leaves. Increasing or improving and maintaining tree and soil health is very important, especially with trees that have high yield. Research has shown that coffee leaf rust is much more detrimental to trees with heavy bearing. And so knowing what kind of fertilizers and knowing the amount of fertilizers that these trees need in order to upkeep their health is important for that tree to be able to then tolerate coffee leaf rust, as well as support their berry load. And then lastly, this is a long-term strategy that's used by other countries, and our researchers are working on being able to recommend leaf rust resistant varieties to our growers. And so in that way, hopefully our growers in the near future will be able to replant and to reduce the amount of fungicides that they need to apply in their field. On the research side of things, we're still in the process of identifying our race of rust. We're testing coffee varieties that are from other countries, as well as those that are found here in Hawaii that were brought in previous years. So we're testing them for rust, but also new varieties. We want to test them for coffee root knot nematode tolerance to see if they need to be grafted before they are put into the field. We also want to verify that any new varieties are going to have good cup quality. We don't want to jeopardize the quality of our coffee coming out of Hawaii and being sold. So we want to make sure that any new varieties that are being recommended and planted are going to have that good flavor and aroma that Hawaii is known for. We are lab as well as field testing coffee approved fungicides that are not yet approved in Hawaii, but may be used in other countries. We want to make sure that if the company is going to include, if HDOA is going to approve these fungicides for use in Hawaii, we want to make sure they first work, as well as are not going to be harmful to the trees and to the consumer. And then we're also testing fungicides that are currently not labeled for coffee and currently not approved for use in Hawaii. We're looking at its efficacy, as well as looking at different registration channels, including Section 18 emergency exemptions and special local need permits. So our next major, I guess this is considered a disease, but it is a microscopic worm that's in the soil. It's called coffee root knot nematode, and this is more specific to Hawaii with the species name of Konaensis. It is a nematode that will burrow into the roots of coffee trees. It'll cause the trees to get knotted, corky roots, and the root damage can be very severe and extensive, to the point where these trees are very shaky. If you move them, they really don't have a good root system. The trees have a difficult time taking up adequate nutrients and water. And as you can see on the picture on the right, there's a definite physical difference also between trees that are susceptible and trees that are tolerant. And so you'll see kind of like flagging leaves, yellowing leaves, just because they're not able to take up the nutrients that they really need. And sometimes these trees will just fall over on their own just because their root systems are just not strong. So coffee root knot nematode is harmful to the industry because also, it's causing these trees to just not be healthy and productive. So it's reducing yields, and it's reducing tree longevity as well. So farmers are having to replant before they really should be needing to. So this is our nematode field at the Quanah Research Station. This field was planted in 2006, and in 2015, this field was stumped. And so you're looking at first year production on these trees. And if you kind of scan through, you'll notice that there's areas where the trees are just not quite as healthy. And so what we found out through this study was Typica, definitely not tolerant to nematode, as well as Purpurea was not tolerant to nematode. What we did find tolerant were the Robusta rootstocks and Liberica rootstocks, although Liberica rootstocks were significantly better than the Robusta rootstocks here in Hawaii for coffee root knot nematode. So a susceptible root system may look like that top left-hand photo. Hardly any roots there, hardly any root hairs, which are really important for the trees to uptake water and nutrients. And then you've got a tolerant rootstock that's going to have a nice, robust root system. These trees are of the Liberica species, and kind of notice that they're much larger leaves compared to the Typica that's right above in the picture on the top right. So they're quite different physically. And the varieties that we've selected for growers through these nematode trials have been Fukunaga, which has been a popular one over the years. And then we recently are recommending a variety called Arnoldiana as well. So they're both Libericas. And growers can also help build up organic materials in their soil to encourage beneficial nematodes to then also help compete with the parasitic nematodes and keep that balance with healthy soils. So some of the projects that we continue on with coffee root knot nematode is to look at replant strategies with grafted trees as well as seedling trees. And so we're looking at, if a field's got nematodes, do they take out that dead or dying tree and replant a new grafted tree right in that hole? Do they plant it next to that dead or dying tree and then take out that tree once the new seedling or grafted tree starts to produce? Do you use compost to help bring in some of that beneficial nematodes and other beneficial bacteria and microbes? Or do you use the original soil that was already there for the replant? Do bionematicides and chemical nematicides help? Venerate and Movental is being looked at, as well as another product which is being tested in the lab called Vellum 1. And part of the bottlenecks also is that if we're recommending grafted trees, there aren't that many grafted trees to begin with. They're expensive. The seed material for rootstock is not quite there as well. So we're trying to get that available to the industry and to also teach industry how to graft coffee. All right, so our next devastating coffee pest is a coffee berry borer, which was found in Hawaii back in 2010. So this is a tiny beetle. It's only about 1.5 millimeters long, and it does start to bore in young green berries, and it can bore into cherry as well, although they typically start in the young green berry, make their way through the skin into the seed of the fruit, where they're all females, so where she will lay her eggs and produce young, which will then consume the bean of the fruit. So while coffee berry borer doesn't kill or harm the tree itself, it harms production and the quality of coffee coming out of Hawaii. So again, our growers use an integrated pest management approach to managing coffee berry borer. foremost and the most important is going to be field sanitation. So after the harvest season, growers are strip picking, removing and destroying or processing the remaining coffee berries, whether they're green or ripe, as well as raisins. So they're removing that off of the tree. And in this way, they're removing the hulls as well as any residual beetles that would remain in the field had they left those berries on the trees. And so they're destroying that to kill CBB within those berries and starting off clean in the next season. Some growers are also using an early season strip pick to remove berries that have developed from early flowerings. So a lot of times coffee berry borer is coming in, boring into those early berries, reproducing, and then those new beetles will then attack the main season's crop. So removing the early season berries helps them to control coffee berry borer. All right, so pruning can also be used, especially stump pruning, to remove plant material as well as berries to control coffee berry borer. They use a 30 trees monitoring system to survey for coffee berry borer and to determine when their threshold is met to start spraying. Growers are using Bavaria bassiana to spray and kill coffee berry borer. We also have a couple of local biocontrols, Cathartis quadriculus and Leptofloius, and they help to control coffee berry borer a little bit. They'll go into the raisins that are inadvertently forgotten on the trees, and they will consume the larva, eggs, and pupa of coffee berry borer. Unfortunately, they don't go after the the adults, and so we're looking at other biocontrols to try and control the adults. And also to do harvest, efficient harvest to constantly remove any ripe and raisin berries throughout the season. So in response to coffee berry borer, you know, it's sometimes hard to change people's attitudes as well as management styles for coffee. And so we were getting a lot of CBB damage coming out, especially in the first 3-4 years that CBB was here. And so the processors were actually starting to reject sellers for high CBB damage. And that helped us to start educating the growers, and the growers started to start managing their coffee a lot better for CBB. Processors were also rewarding growers for clean coffee, which had low damage. And so the price of cherry was based on their level of CBB. And this year, our prices are at $2.35 a pound for clean coffee. And as the damage increases, the price per pound of cherry will start to decrease to the point where processors still may not purchase the coffee cherry from the farmer. Processors are also sorting at the wet and dry mills with cherry sorters as well as green coffee sorters with optical sorters. And then the growers are responding to the introduction of CBB by adding in foliar fertilizers with their Bavaria sprays. You know, it's the product doesn't cost that much, but it's usually the labor part, you know, that's expensive. And so if they can increase the health of their trees, increase production by adding foliar fertilizers to their sprays that they're already going to do to control coffee berry borer, that's what they've been doing. On the government side of things, the growers have actually gotten the Hawaii Department of Agriculture to create a Bavaria subsidy program. And this program helps the grower by reducing the cost of the product for Bavaria products by 50%. So it's an annual reimbursement that, you know, the grower can get up to $600 per acre for the cost of Bavaria products and up to $6,000 per farm. And this year, because of coffee leaf rust, the Department of Agriculture has also added on a fungicide subsidy program for coffee leaf rust products. So our next disease, which can also kill young plants, defoliates plants, can also cause dieback of berries and branches, is called anthracnose or colototricum. We see it on young plants and young verticals as these lesions in the second photo. It causes defoliation and dieback of the branches. And then in severe cases, we do see berries dying like the photo on the right. And so growers are using fungicide treatments such as these in the table. So this is a list of the different fungicides that can be also used for coffee leaf rust. They're color coded so that the farmer can rotate between the different FRAC groups of the different fungicides so that we prevent resistance by coffee leaf rust as well as any other diseases that they're trying to treat, including anthracnose. So this listing has coffee leaf rust on the label. Another product that growers can use for anthracnose, which does not have coffee leaf rust on the label, is a product called Rampart. And when spraying for anthracnose, the rates are for colototricum, which tend to be a lot higher than rates for coffee leaf rust. So knowing what disease you're actually trying to kill will help you determine what kind of rates you need to use. And of course, good coverage, covering the entire tree, particularly getting under the leaves for coffee leaf rust, and getting good coverage penetration into the center of the canopy as well. So we've created a spray publication more specific to coffee leaf rust, but it does cover good spray coverage and reasons for spraying that would also cover for anthracnose as well as other coffee diseases. And we have that publication translated from English to Spanish, Ilocano, as well as Tagalog. All right, so black twig borer is a beetle that looks very similar to coffee berry borer. They're just a hair smaller. We do find them going into the berry as well, but they don't reproduce within the berry. They tend to just kind of stay in the skin or at the base of the berry and then, exit out. And we typically find them in branches. So lateral branches, like you see in that left picture, that are dead. Sometimes we'll see leaves flagging before you actually see that branch turn brown. We'll see them in verticals also. And when you split open that branch, they create these galleries, bring in fungal materials that help them feed, or they feed on that fungus as well, and it will kill the branch. So it affects current production as well as future years of production on those branches that they kill. Ants and soft body insects kind of go together. I should back up and say that the management for coffee, for black twig borer, is going to be just mechanical removal of these branches that have the insect pest. So basically you want to be finding the hole on that branch and cutting behind that hole. So you're removing the branch with the hole so that you're removing all of the life cycles of the beetle, whether it's adults, eggs, and their pupal stages, and then destroying that material so they cannot escape and get back into the farm. So none of our insecticides really work on black twig borer, just mechanical removal and destruction. Okay, so moving on, ants and soft body insects, like I was saying, they kind of go together. And so, the ants can move soft body insects to coffee, or the soft body insects may end up on the plant, whether they crawl or fly. And the ants help to farm them. They protect these soft body insects. And then in return, scales, mealybugs, and aphids will exude a sticky substance that we consider honeydew. And the ants will feed off of that. And this honeydew spreads over the leaves. And then sooty mold will come in to cover the leaves, and that affects photosynthesis. So because of the insects sucking on the internal juices of the plants, the sooty mold covering the leaves, the plants can really decline in health, and particularly we see this happening in the younger trees. So good management, with pruning and physical removal, as well as insecticides, oil treatments, and other pesticides will help to control the soft body insects. And we use baits as well as gels to help control the ants. So we have a Hawaii ant lab that has done some testing. We really don't have too many baits and gel baits that are approved for use on coffee. And so Tangle is the product that's used most frequently. It is a gel bait that can be sprayed into the canopy of large trees. It helps to, it's taken up by the ants and taken back into the colony and then fed to the colony. So over time, it'll create colony collapse and help to control the colonies that way. Antix is another product that growers can now use, and it is a granular bait that can be spread around coffee trees on the ground and in trees that are young. Other products that can be used to control the soft-bodied insects are Ampede, some of the oils, Tritech and Pure Spray Green, Movento, Applaud, and Admire Pro. And for Admire Pro, we do not recommend repeated use of this. We do tend to see mite flare-ups because Admire Pro is a non-selective insecticide, and it will kill off the good and bad insects as well. So one of the diseases that look like coffee leaf rust is called Cercospora leaf spot. It causes the spots on the leaves, and it also causes a berry blotch. It's also known as iron spot in other countries. And the difference between coffee leaf rust and coffee leaf spot is if you were to turn over the leaf, you would not see those powdery spores on spots that are formed from Cercospora. And Cercospora also causes this sunburn on the berries, and it causes the berries to kind of ripen unevenly. If these berries are harvested and processed, a lot of times they become Quakers because they are not quite mature. So the fungicides that are used for controlling anthracnose as well as coffee leaf rust will also help to control Cercospora. And our last two, banana moth for the first. The moth will lay its eggs at the base of young growth. When the caterpillar emerges, it will eat around the base of that new growth, and sometimes you'll find it in the stem. And that causes the new growth to become very weak. And so they'll either break off as young shoots, or when the pickers are coming through and harvesting, those branches will break off. And of course, now you've lost the production off that branch. Delegate WG is a product that can be used to control lepidopterans, such as these on coffee. And spraying when the new growth is just coming out of the stump trees or out of the pruned branches is really critical for the timing and to kill those caterpillars before they enter into the stem. And lastly, slug and snails are also a problem, particularly with younger trees, trees in the nursery and young trees that are planted out in the field. Slugs and snails will start to rasp on the bark of these young growths. And sometimes, as you see in the far right picture, they eat away at the bark of the young growth so much that they take away the cambium layer of the tree. And that will prevent the flow of water and nutrients from going up and down the tree. And the tree may survive for a little while, but they tend to be very weak. And over time, they do die. And of course, slug and snails are also contributors to rat lungworm disease. So we need to also be careful of that. As you can see, the semi-slug that's crawling on some of those green berries on the far left picture. So growers can use Sluggo around their coffee trees, and in other places, I think they can also use Deadline to help to control slugs and snails and prevent them from consuming the bark. So I wanted to share with you just a screenshot of the hawaiicoffeeed.com website. Additional information on coffee pests and diseases, as well as our events and other announcements can be found at this website. And so if you were to hover over the tab for coffee leaf rust, you can also find some of the publications that have been translated into other languages, such as Spanish, Tagalog, and Ilocano. So those basically are the three languages that our workers typically speak and read. So that's the most common that they're going to be translated to for us in Hawaii. And recently, legislation was created by the Hawaii delegation. And this is important for you guys as well, because it covers United States coffee, not just Hawaii. And it enables research funding to not only address coffee berry borer, but all current and any new and emerging threats to the coffee industry in the United States. And it's called the Coffee Plant Health Initiative Amendment Act. And so it helps to remove the restrictions and the limiting scope of research and grant funding for coffee plants. And so, in the future, that's going to be really important to getting more research funding and more research ongoing to help with the different challenges that the growers currently face, as well as any new threats. So great stuff from the delegation this year. And, just to kind of wrap things back up together, I know you guys don't have all these coffee pests and diseases, but, just what I can suggest to you guys to try and help protect your coffee industry from these new pests and diseases is really go hard with prevention. If you do have any kind of quarantine rules and regulations on coffee, see if there's a way to strengthen them so that introductions are not coming into the state and affecting your farms. Educate yourself on diseases and pests that you currently have, as well as the ones that are not yet there in California. And be prepared, start creating materials so that growers are aware of these pests and diseases, know what to look for, and, even working with other agencies and researchers to be prepared with fungicides, insecticides, and other pesticides to help control these new pests that may arrive to California. It's really hard when growers are not cohesive. And so, being a united front, working together, being a team in California with all the different facets of the industry is really going to be to your benefit in asking for money, asking for help, and also in collaborating, with your legislators, your CDFA industry, extension, other researchers and folks in California, as well as in other places. When you come together as a united front and a united voice, folks tend to listen and tend to want to help because they don't want to have to pick sides. And so, continue to remain as a team and united. That's something that over the years, CBB has actually kind of brought our industry together and has made it easier for even Hawaii to go and ask for that help. And with that, I wanted to just make sure that I acknowledge and thank our funding agencies and support from USDA NIFA, the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, the Western Extension Risk Management Education Center, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, CTAR, and the University of Hawaii, the Hawaii Coffee Association, the Hawaii Coffee Growers Association, Maui Coffee Association, the United Ka'u Farmers Cooperative, as well as Nutrient Ag Solutions and other partners that we have throughout the Hawaii industry. Thank you all for your funding and support throughout the years. My contact information, as well as my colleague Stuart Nakamoto's contact information, is on the screen. If you have any questions, if you want to send me photos of your coffee, if there's something you're not sure of, go ahead and text it to me or email it to me. I'm happy to help. Stuart and I really enjoy working with you guys in California, learning from you guys as well, and also sharing our information with your growers and industry. Feel free to please visit the website. I encourage you to go there as you can. And again, if you have any questions and need to be in touch with me, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And so we'll just launch into some questions. I started putting some questions here in the box, and I'll just go ahead and read them. If other people have questions you want to write in the box, please do so. I was curious about what are some of the coffee leaf rust resistant varieties, cultivars, that you are experimenting with, and how that's going with implementation.
So at our research station, we have some older varieties of catamore that are showing resistance in the field, and they're basically surrounded by coffee leaf rust, and they are not showing coffee leaf rust on those trees. So right now we're looking at cupping those catamores this year, and then looking at ways to reproduce those trees. And if they do cup well, getting some of that material out to the industry, if that's what they want. Other varieties include Tupi and Obata that are being looked at. There are some others from the different countries that Dr. Tracy Matsumoto is looking at. She worked with the World Coffee Research, and she holds the germplasm at USDA PBARC. So she's looking at different varieties, and offhand, I don't know which one she's working with, but I'm happy to find out from her, or at least get you in touch with her.
And you said USDA what?
USDA PBARC, Pacific Basin Agricultural Research Center. They're located in Hilo on the Big Island.
Okay, cool.
And the doctor was Tracy Matsumoto.
Thanks. And so next question, I kind of jotted a couple to start. So we don't currently have extension agents focusing on coffee in California. I think we're very new and small considered other crops in California. What do you think are some of the important services that extension agents provide to coffee growers in Hawaii? And if we were to advocate for some governmental support to get like a researcher, or what do you think is the most important area for your work there with growers?
Okay. Yeah, so I guess because we have such a big industry here, we've had agents who don't solely focus on coffee, but have a lot of coffee in their daily work. For 20 plus years at least, Virginia Easton Smith was the agent prior to me in Kona. We also had Melanie Sheena, who was on the east side, who also had some coffee time. And so I think for us, that's the reason why we do have coffee as a main commodity that agents work on. And so one of the more important services that we provide, I feel anyway, is keeping the information consistent to growers. And so growers get very confused when they're hearing different management solutions or identification results of, for their questions, right? So they get confused if people are telling them different things. And so having just one voice, at least helping them through this all, I think helps you kind of level out some of that confusion. And I think that's where my position comes in. I'm statewide, and so I do work with growers on the Big Island as well as throughout the state. So they all kind of can come to me for questions and any kind of solutions that I may be able to help them with. And so advocating for support for you guys in California, I think showing the government how important you guys are, how serious you guys are in this industry, what you could also look like with the support. right? So if you had the government support, extension support, research support, how your industry could grow and, you know, give back to the economy, give back to the culture in California and people's livelihoods. So I think that's one way of trying to advocate for yourselves and to try and get more support.
And do you see any defect level differentiation between like early harvest pickings and late season pickings? And do you notice any kind of variation in cup quality?
Which pest are you talking about? I know there were lots that I went over.
Oh, I was, it's more just generalized defects.
Okay.
I saw that you had kind of sometimes made the recommendation of kind of doing an early harvest kind of removal of cherries in order to kind of get rid of some pests. But I was wondering, do you guys do much tracking of, I know defects is a big category, but variation in terms of when the harvest is, or cup quality variations in terms of when the harvest is?
Yeah, so before CBB, so kind of like your guys' situation where you don't have coffee berry borer right now. So in Hawaii, prior to CBB arriving, growers did not do any of the strip picking at the end of the harvest or at the beginning of the season. But we also know that in the beginning of the season and at the end of the season, you tend to have more floaters and tend to have a little more defects than the main crop. The main crop is where the tree is putting more of its energy into these berries. As long as you've got the water source, right, to feed the berries and to keep those beans full, you shouldn't have the floaters during the main season as well. When it comes to pests and diseases, though, sometimes it doesn't really matter where they affect the coffee in terms of the harvest season. They can show up early on, they can show up midway through your harvest, they can show up late in the harvest. That is more dependent on weather or local climate, as well as the severity of the disease or pest issue. So, but in general, usually that beginning and end of the harvest is going to be of lower quality than the main harvest.
Interesting. And then also we had a question at our last coffee grower dialogue about whether there's any kind of studies on the impact of the various treatments, specifically fungicide treatments, on the cup qualities. Do you have any kind of data points on that, or do you know of how these different treatments impact cup qualities?
Right now, we have not done the cup quality with the different fungicide treatments that we're using for anthracnose, cercospora, and coffee leaf rust. USDA does have Q grade cuppers, as well as we have them throughout the industry as well. And so that's something that more than likely will be looked at. I mean, we don't want to jeopardize coffee quality here in Hawaii. So that's something to consider in the future. We just recently got pretty decent funding through the SCRI. And so work will be starting on some of the research for coffee leaf rust. So.
Cool. Yeah, it's good to know. We had that question come up last week, and I felt a little embarrassed that I didn't know. It makes me feel better that you guys have, so much more time doing it. You don't know either. I know it is really hard to get really accurate cupping data, right? There's so many variables at all the different sites, and it's hard to know what was what caused what, and sometimes the cupper is a little bit, even though they're Q graded, they could be a little bit off, or the roast was off. It's just so many different variables in cupping.
Exactly.
So our next question is from Joy Yang, and her question is intercropping common in Hawaii? And do you see benefit in terms of disease and pest management?
Yeah, intercropping is pretty common. We are seeing farms that have reduced the amount of shade in their coffee over the years, but we still have combinations of avocado and coffee, macnut and coffee, and other fruit trees and coffee. So that is pretty common. With coffee leaf rust now, some of the recommendations are to manage shade. So having too much shade will reduce yields, but help to manage the impacts of coffee leaf rust. And having too much sun and sun-grown coffee can also be detrimental in trying to manage coffee leaf rust because of the stress that's on the tree. And so, some of that is challenging for the grower, and some folks are reducing the amount of crops that they have on the farm that are overstory trees, and some are trying to plant to create more shade. The benefits of disease and pests. So with green scale, we see that in shaded coffee orchards, white halo fungus is a beneficial organism that will help to control green scale in the natural environment. And so the shaded environments will help the white halo fungus to naturally control green scale, as well as some other soft-bodied insects. I don't know if that many other benefits for particular diseases and pests. Because even with coffee berry borer, if you have too much shade, coffee berry borer really loves shade. And so you tend to get more beetles reproducing in those areas of shade than in the open sun areas. If the intercropped species of trees drops their leaves and their nitrogen fixing, that can be beneficial just overall for soil and tree health as well, and not necessarily just for the disease and plant pest issues.
All right, we have Marta is raising her hand. Marta, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yep. So my question is, you mentioned, Andrea, resistant cultivars you're introducing, resistance to coffee rust or resistance to nematodes. So how long you had those cultivars in field, and if you see any breakthrough, basically if you see that those pests evolving quite fast, and you can see that those cultivars already lost resistance, basically, yeah, for how long resistant cultivars will be resistant? That's my question.
At this point, we don't know. Leaf rust was only found in last October in Hawaii. So we're so new to this that we don't know how some of these rust resistant varieties are going to handle rust and how long they'll have that resistance to our particular strain of rust that we have right now. We've had these plants since the 50s, 60s at least. Oahu also has some of the resistant varieties at Hark too. And so we just have to kind of wait and see what's going to happen. These are old catamore varieties that we have at the station. And so we know that new varieties have been created that have better resistance than these. But so far, we are not seeing rust on these trees, but who knows how long that's going to last. So Tracy is also looking to try and determine, I guess, the genetics of these different varieties that we have here, and to make sure that they are what they are. So she's doing genomic markers and having that tested as well. So hopefully we can also find markers for resistance and use that in the future in breeding. So even between Tupi and Obata, I don't know if, sounds like Tupi is not really Tupi that we have, because those trees were also not holding their resistance to coffee leaf rust in the lab. So a lot of the trees were not even showing any kind of resistance. Some were a little bit and some were not. So we're double checking the materials that we have.
What about nematodes?
So for nematodes, Roxana Myers, she's a nematologist with USDA. She's also testing the different varieties for nematode tolerance or resistance. And that's so that we know, can growers plant seedling, or do they have to graft in order to get that tolerance to nematode? So far, she's not found tolerance to the varieties that she's been testing. So we're still recommending using grafted materials for the survivability of trees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And can coffee berry borer live in green coffee?
Processed green coffee, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it can. So depending on the moisture content of green coffee as well as parchment, they can continue to live as adults. The eggs, larva, pupa, they don't tend to survive because it becomes so dry, but the adults can continue to consume the berry, especially if the moisture is higher than about 11%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that surprises me, that we don't have the coffee berry borer yet. And I think most researchers I've spoken to do stress yet with coffee berry borer, just that we would have arguably more green coffee in California than anywhere in the world, per se, with
Mm-hmm.
the Annex and Long Beach being major ports. So it's just, yeah, kind of a little bit surprising that we haven't seen any signs of it just yet.
Yeah, so it helps to mechanically dry, whether it's the physical tumbling of the beans or the heat itself helps to kill and remove the coffee berry borer beetles from green coffee. And then fumigation will also help to kill pests and diseases too. So, you know, that helps to reduce the chances that you guys are bringing in pests and diseases into California.
Hawaii doesn't allow any green coffee to come in from other parts of the world, right? You have to fumigate the whole container, and it's just totally a nightmare, so nobody would ever do it, right?
Yeah, no, all green coffee coming in from out of state, out of country, has to be fumigated before it comes in. And so you got to wonder, how did coffee berry borer come into the country, right? And you know, I mean, there's rumors that of smuggling and bringing in seed from other countries, and that we don't know how it came in reality, but that's always a pathway, a potential pathway for pests and diseases to come in, which is through smuggling and illegal movement of coffee seed, coffee leaves, coffee trees. So growers should be aware of that. They're only hurting their own industry anyway, you know, doing that kind of stuff, and really should go through the proper channels.
Yeah, we've been trying to stress that as much as we can. I was kind of smiling at the idea, if we could fumigate all of our green coffee coming into the country, we'd have quite the business opportunity here with our California growers. But I don't think that'll ever happen because we'd be able to provide enough coffee for about very little of California, not to mention the rest of the United States. Cool. So there's another question here that's coming in from Stephen, and he is asking, are there any traps used for surveillance of any of the pests?
Yeah, for coffee berry borer, there are roca traps, or some folks are using homemade traps with a lure that's made of methanol and ethanol, and a soapy water container to help kill the beetles that fall into the trap. Some of the growers do use it for monitoring still, although most have moved on to just observational monitoring. Some still use the 30 trees monitoring system as well as traps. But typically for locations that don't have coffee berry borer yet, the actual just monitoring and visual monitoring of coffee berries is going to be more successful than traps. At low infestation levels, sometimes the traps don't even catch coffee berry borer. And if you're just looking through, checking your berries, we have found CBB in berries that are 6 feet away from a trap. So they can be used. They are an attractant, so just remember that as well. But they typically are just used to watch for spikes or increases in activity by coffee berry borer throughout the season. Some of the growers are just using in the beginning of their season when there are no coffee on the trees. They're setting up these traps and using it to, attract and kill coffee berry borer that remains in the field and to reduce the population that way. And then they remove the traps. Some farms, like the mechanically harvested farms, are using traps throughout the year and kind of moving them around to see where CBB is increasing in population in those particular areas. We're talking 125 to 3,000 acres of farm, that's why. So they are using traps throughout the year to see where they need to spray next.
It's, and I just sent you a little direct message, Andrea, about John Vandermeer, University of Michigan. He's been working in coffee for 50 years, doing research in Mexico and Puerto Rico. And he knows a lot about coffee leaf rust if you wanted to kind of reach out to him. And he's got a number of great books as well. He's kind of one of the fathers of agroforestry. So really interesting guy. And we don't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd recommend reaching out to him.
I think you had a question above him.
Yeah, I kind of skipped by that was one. I had so many questions, I kind of skimmed by it. But yeah, I was asking, so your wet mills are paying $2.35, and is that for cherry weight prior to processing?
Yes, it is. So typically at the wet mills, the farmer will offload their cherry. The workers at that mill will take random samples of their cherry and then determine the damage by CBB on the beans. So they're not looking at holes on the cherries. They're actually, looking at 50 berries, pulping them and looking how many beans have CBB damage to them. And then they're using that percentage to determine the pay scale for that particular grower's load on that particular day.
But you can't make any assessments as to the defect levels, right? That would only be for coffee berry borer, that random sampling.
Just for coffee berry borer.
Yeah, because I always tell our growers that we really have no idea whether it's 95 point coffee or 75 point coffee just by looking at the exterior of the cherry, and so that's why the first payment is insignificant in comparison to the final payment once we really know what the green coffee quality is. Does anyone else have any additional questions before we wrap this up? Please feel free to write them in the box, or if you want to unmute yourself and say something. It doesn't have to be about diseases or pests. It can be really about anything as long as it's coffee related.
And I did put in my contact earlier. I'll put it back in again into the chat. So even after this presentation, if you guys have any questions and you'd like to send them to me, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate all the great information you share with us, Andrea, and all the great work you are doing there at the University of Hawaii. And thank you to Stuart as well and all of your colleagues. And yeah, we thank you for your time. It doesn't sound like any other questions we're having. So, oh, it looks like we got one more. Oh, just a thank you. Yeah, some thank you messages in the box from Joy and from Stephen. And yeah. Well, I'm going to stop recording, and unless you have any final message you want to.
No, all great. Just, thank you very much, Ben, for hosting these. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll get Marta asked for a PDF of your presentation. Sure. So we'll get that.